His life clung to our world by a single strand, slowly being torn away as more and more blood began to pool up around his body.
He's losing blood fast, and I don't think anyone here has the expertise to patch up a crossbow bolt to the eye, other than him. So unless we find a doctor or a cloning machine, he's screwed.
On the way here, I decided to listen in on police frequencies.
Shots fired at Silver Lake Recreational Campsite. Wait for backup or should I move in?
Hey man, I'm sorry about before. Are you okay?
Touch me again, and I'll beat your ass!
Does anyone know any doctors? Maybe someone won't give us up?
I got it. Isabella Novato, student at the Indiana University School of Medicine.
There's something I need to do, and I'm not going to let anyone stop me from doing it. And if a man's life is on the line, I don't want anyone to wait for me either.
I'll come with you, and once you're done, we can meet back up with them.
Would you really do that?
For you, definitely. When we arrived in Chicago, we expected to be greeted by a bustling and crowded city full of wonder, but instead, we found a dreary bundle of buildings and blank sidewalks.
The hell? Where'd everyone go?
Hunter asked as he glanced out the window.
Oh! Maybe they were abducted by aliens!
Or
Maddie interrupted.
one is hiding because of the damn virus spreading around. I told you this thing is serious.
Hunter scoffed.
Nah, that thing is just another bug. It's not like it's gonna actually kill someone.
Actually, according to the latest news report, 11,000 people have died from it.
Hunter scoffed in a defeated way.
Yeah, well, you suck dick.
Stop arguing and shut up.
Andrew told us as the RV slowed down.
We're here.
The RV pulled over on the side of the road, the door opening to let Space and I out. We took our backpacks and I took my revolver as well. I stuffed it into my waistband, covering it with my loose brown jacket. I also took one of Luis's 4 machetes, shoving it into my bag just in case.
Are you sure about this?
Andrew asked.
I mean, we let you make popcorn once, and you stuffed 3 bags right into the microwave.
Just because I burnt popcorn once 2 years ago doesn't mean I can't navigate around a city, I told him.
Fine. But you two better be back before we leave Indiana. And if you're not, I won't hesitate to drive off.
Same to you, I said. Stay safe. Space walked away, but before Andrew closed the door, he handed me something. A thick black military dagger with a sharpened blade.
Just in case. Don't use your phones. And if you run into trouble, don't hesitate to take a life.
How is it that you were able to do it so easy last night? You shot 2 people like it was nothing, I asked.
It's not the first time I've taken a life.
He answered. Obviously, he didn't want to press the issue, and neither did I, in fear of losing my life. All right then. I'll see you soon, I told him. He nodded, closing the door before driving off down the road. The RV drove around the corner, disappearing from sight. We were on our own now. Space and I turned around, walking down the street as we entered the large city known as Chicago. Somehow, I felt like it was different. The sky was bleak, a light rain showering down upon us. It wasn't much, but I still felt the small drips coming down on my shoulder. The main difference was the people. There weren't that many out and about, but the few that were out were wearing white face masks. Must be because of that virus thing Maddie said was going around, I whispered to her.
Maybe. You think they recognize us?
She asked. Our faces shouldn't be on the news, should they? It's not like we're the biggest news story in the country, right? I asked as we passed by several old stores. Space sighed as she turned her head.
You jinxed it.
We both turned to see a TV playing a news article where a man was discussing the bombing of Greenbrook City. On the side of the screen were 7 pictures. Our pictures. Me, Andrew, Spencer, Quinn, Space, Hunter, and Madeline.
We believe they are traveling across the country in a white recreational vehicle, last seen early this morning at Silver Lake Recreational Parks. They are armed and dangerous, having fatally wounded 3 civilians so far and are most likely out to take more lives.
The man said. I cursed under my breath. Shit.
In other news, the deadly outbreak known as the Z virus is spreading across the country, having infected most of California.
Is that the
Utah.
same thing we were watching yesterday? I asked her. Space nodded, and we stopped to look at the screen.
New York City can officially be added to the list of dangerous cities after a large horde of these mysterious mutants have broken out of St. Barsley Hospital. Luckily, they were unable to do any massive damage before local superhero the Jade Stranger intercepted and recaptured them inside an abandoned building.
The man continued. A small video appeared in the corner of the screen, showing what looked to be some sort of human-like creature with gray skin, sharp claws, pulsing purple veins, and blood dripping from his eyes, being surrounded by police. They gunned him down, firing round after round at the creature until he dropped dead. Everyone was worried about the monsters, but there was a more urgent thought coming to mind. Lydia. I wonder if she had come across them, or if she had become one of them. She mentioned before she knew the Jade Stranger, but never said more than that. I thought in my mind, I hope she's okay.
The CDC is recommending all individuals to wash their hands and self-isolate in an attempt to stop the virus from spreading any further. At the time of this broadcast, we are unable to pinpoint the source, but research is being conducted on infected test subjects.
Jesus. So it's not just the nuclear attack. It's an outbreak too. I said.
This is how America dies.
Los Angeles, Atlanta, Evansville, Houston, San Diego, and several other cities listed on screen have been dictated as off-limits by the government due to health concerns and are in the process of being evacuated. New York City and Indianapolis may be added in the coming days if the situation does not calm down.
Indianapolis. That's where the others are going.
Space whispered. I nodded. Let's get this done soon then. A police car drove by behind us, and I briefly turned around, eyeing them closely. Luckily, they turned the corner instead of stopping.
Just follow me. Let's get in and out before the police find us.
She said, pulling her cat beanie further down her head. I reached into my backpack, pulling out a black cap I equipped to try and hide my face. She led me down the sidewalk and across the street, stopping in front of an old graveyard. However, the gates were blocked off, a big fat silver lock keeping them shut. The paper taped to it informed that the cemetery was closed for maintenance.
Seriously?
She asked, slightly tearing up.
Why today of all days?
Frustrated, Space kicked at the door before turning around, sitting down on the curb and burying her head in her face. I frowned, turning around to try and find a solution. I eyed an old church down the road, the fences connected to it. Hey, get up. Maybe there's a way inside over there, I said, as I tapped her on the shoulder. She looked up at me, sniffling, as I grabbed her hand. The two of us walked down the road, approaching the small chapel. I observed the building closely, eyeing the chipped paint along the walls, the dusty and boarded-up windows, and the rusted doorknob. There was a mess of flyers and posters pinned to the side of the building, all on top of each other. As well as laying on the ground below it were several smashed bottles. Beside the door was a potted plant containing bright blue flowers.
What is it?
Space asked. Well, judging by the look of this church, it seems pretty old, circa 1800s, and the workers around the graveyard don't seem to tend to it. Most likely an old building they aren't bothered to tear down due to the cost. But one that isn't in use anymore, I explained to her. The amount of posters on the side support that theory, and the broken glass beneath it gives me an idea.
An idea?
She asked, curiously. Cheap alcohol, I said, as I picked up a piece of glass and sniffed it. Most likely neighborhood kids coming around here and using this place as sort of makeshift hideout to drink behind their parents' back.
How would you know that?
She asked, crossing her arms. Because I snuck out with Hunter and Luis once when they went to go do it. We hid out in that empty house down the street from Spencer's, the one with the broken gazebo out back, I told her. She scoffed.
So you actually went out drinking with them? Being only 17.
I didn't actually drink anything. The two of them did. After seeing what 5 bottles of beer a day did to my stepdad, I decided to swear off drinking unless I was around people that I trust, I informed her, kneeling down to the potted plant beside the door.
Is there something wrong?
She asked. It doesn't match, I told her. The chapel is old, run down, and dead, but these flowers look brand new. I reached out, brushing the flowers against my hand before confirming my suspicions. Fake. Just like the flower pot that it's stuffed inside. I turned the pot around, revealing a small compartment on the back. I opened it up, revealing an old bronze key sitting inside. I snatched it up and approached the door, shoving the key into the lock.
Well, damn, Annie, I never knew you were a regular Sherlock Holmes.
She exclaimed in awe. I blushed. No, I'm really not. I watch a lot of crime shows, and I took a forensics class online.
Interested in becoming a detective, then?
She asked. I shrugged. Maybe someday, if this whole end-of-the-world thing ends up blowing over. The lock clicked, and I pushed the door open, revealing the dusty inside of a church. A large hall sat in front of us, one that reminded me of when I was a kid, when my mom used to bring me to church. On each side of the long carpet were those wooden seats where people would sit and stand to sing and pray. At the end of the hall was a white podium and a stained glass window dimmed by dust. Light was shining through the other windows, one of which was cracked.
I don't think we should be here. Maybe we could find someone who works here?
She suggested. Calm down. It's only mildly illegal, I told her with a choking grin.
I didn't take you to be a troublemaker,
she said. I shrugged. When you spend a lot of time around Hunter and Luis, you pick up a few things and learn to run free. Space began wandering through the small chapel, admiring the old-fashioned vibe it gave off. When she got to the podium, she looked back at me and giggled. I scoffed. What's so funny?
A bit more sad than funny, but I was gonna say, even if we do die, at least we got a chance to walk down the aisle.
She told me with a giggle. Ha ha, I said sarcastically. We're gonna live through this, and we're gonna get married. I don't mean to each other, of course, though. She giggled and set down her backpack.
Oh, Annie, think before you speak.
Space looked away from me and back towards the wall, and ended up walking into a cobweb. She shrieked, swiping it away and spitting it out of her mouth. Then you watch before you walk. I have a bad feeling about this place, I told her as I stepped up towards the podium. A voice echoed through the room.
You shouldn't.
Space went to the gun in her waistband and I gripped my revolver, aiming it towards the door. Beside the front entrance was another room, where a man was standing in the doorway. He didn't try anything, and didn't seem dangerous. Just a simple young man, but certainly not a pastor or religious type. He was maybe in his late 20s or early 30s, and his skin was almost a vampiric type of paleness I had never seen before. He had messy brown hair and a pair of black spectacles hanging on his nose, along with a pair of deep red eyes. He wore a black suit with a red tie and was leaning on a dark black cane. Who are you? I asked him as I gripped the revolver tightly. He shrugged.
Someone far from home. Same as you. I've seen you every time you've come. Last year with your mother and father, and the year before that with your uncle and aunt.
I raised the revolver and growled at him. Stay back. Who the hell are you? He sighed.
My name is Eric. I'm a sort of slave to graveyards. I have the most important job here.
So you work here? I asked him. He smiled.
You could say that. I keep intruders, like you, from trespassing.
Well, why are you here? Isn't this place closed?
The graveyards may be closed, but that doesn't mean my duty's over. Teenage kids always come about to spray paint the graves, and it's my job to keep them out.
Eric explained. All right then. Now leave before I shoot you. I shouted at him.
Shoot me? Oh, I'd like to see you try. You're too scared,
He said.
I have other matters to attend to anyways, so I shall leave you here. There's a gap in the wall behind the podium, if you're looking to get inside the graveyard.
Eric then turned, walking back into the other room. He didn't bother to close the door, but we heard no noise. It's almost like he vanished. That was weird, I told her, crossing my arms after holstering my gun.
Not the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Space said before turning around. I raised an eyebrow. What is the weirdest thing, then?
The hidden vor folder on Spencer's laptop.
Space told me as she knelt down beside a hole in the wall. Never mind, you win. You find a way out? I asked. Space gestured for me to follow, and we both knelt down beside the hole. It was just barely big enough for the two of us to slip through, it seemed. I crawled through first, Space following behind me. The two of us stepped out into the graveyard, where the rain seemed to have died down. She led me past rows and rows of graves, each one with a significant amount of flowers. She finally stopped at a specific grave on the end of the third row, where a vase of dead roses sat. Keith Allen, 1991 to 2012.
Me and my parents come here every year to pay our respects. Every year on the day of the funeral. I wanted to come here one more time before we left, just so I could leave him a final message.
She told me, finally revealing her intentions. You should have said so. The others would have agreed, I told her as I knelt down beside her.
Quinn's life is on the line. He's more important. My brother's already gone.
She told me as she dug into her backpack. I knelt down beside her, eyeing the grave closely, and there was more text on the bottom that I didn't notice before. Purple Heart. He was in the military? I asked.
Yep. Keith joined the Marines when I was 9. Against my parents' wishes. They wanted him in the family business, but he wanted to fight for his country. He was stationed in Afghanistan for 1.5 years. Died in an IED explosion. The explosion hit him hard, and the remainder of his squad tried to get him back to base. He didn't make it.
She said, solemnly, a somber tone filling the air. She touched the grave with her fingertip and began whispering to him. I closed my eyes and pressed my hands together, praying for him and us. I wasn't entirely sure how to act, since I had never gone to a funeral or visited a grave before, but I assumed I just had to pray. Afterwards, she sighed, wiping tears out of her eyes. She then turned to me and asked with a sniffle,
Promise me you won't go anywhere, okay? We've lost Louise. We may lose Quinn, and I don't want to lose you or anyone else.
I nodded, standing up and looking back towards the chapel. I asked her, "Need a moment alone?" She shook her head.
I'm done. We need to get a move on.
Space walked off back towards the house, leaving a single flower from her backpack on his grave. I followed behind her, leaving the somber tone behind when she closed and locked the door. "Where to next?" I asked her. She shrugged.
You're our leader. So lead. We've got to find a ride, right?
Yeah, I think so. We can go and hotwire a car, maybe. Come on, let's take a walk, I told her, as I exited the chapel. She smiled and followed. locking the door behind us. Did you really have to get an extra sample?
Well, it tastes good.
We walked down the street, Space continuing to eat her ice cream. Her sadness continued even after we left the graveyard, so I made the executive decision to drag her into the nearest ice cream parlor. It paid off, and I could see the sparkles in her eyes as she looked over the 24 vats of ice cream flavors. I sat down on a wooden bench on the side of the street, and she sat next to me, continuing to eat a few spoonfuls of ice cream. Her long blonde hair blew in the breeze, and her feelings of happiness felt comforting. I had never been comfortable around many girls, except for one childhood friend. Maddie, I had technically been around a lot, but she was a bit tomboyish, and I always thought of her just as one of us. Space was much different, being very much shy unless forced into a debate. She got to the bottom of the cup of ice cream and scooped up the last of it with her spoon. She then put the spoon up to my mouth, stuffing it through my closed lips and giving me a taste of the chocolate ice cream. Ugh! At least get a new spoon!
Relax, Annie. Come on. Let's have some fun while we're here.
She said, with a grin. We gotta meet back up with the others, though, I told her. What if Quinn dies? What if they get in trouble and need us?
You don't trust Andrew to keep them safe?
I don't trust him not to shoot first and get them into a situation they can't get out of. He's a bit impulsive, I explained to her. She sighed.
I see your point. Fine. How are we getting back in the first place?
We hijack a car.
And how are you, of all people, going to do that?
Once again, while I don't agree with Hunter's misdeeds, they are useful. She crossed her arms.
You know how to hotwire a car?
Vaguely, I lied to her. Let's just find a car nobody else is using. As we walked down the street, Space reached down and grabbed onto the sleeve of my jacket. I smiled faintly due to this, but tried to hide it when she looked my way. I noticed her glance back to the people walking down the street, most of them wearing white surgical masks like the people we saw earlier.
Hey, Annie. Is there anything you want to do before you die?
Space asked curiously as she turned to me. I looked to her, unsure of my answer. Well, I'm not really sure. Why, of all questions, are you asking that?
After what happened last night with Quinn, it just got me thinking. What if it was you? Or me? Or Maddie? Any of us could have been the one to go down. What if we weren't as lucky as him?
Lucky? There's an arrow in his eye.
He's alive, though. My point is, any of us could die at any time. So I'm just wondering, what do you want to do before you die?
I took a few seconds to think before answering. Well, ride a motorcycle, see my family in Mexico again.
Mexico?
She asked. Yeah, don't you remember? Almost all my family on my dad's side is living down in Mexico, I told her. I showed you guys pictures last time I visited.
Oh, right. Sorry. What else?
Let me think. Maybe get in a relationship at some point, I admitted.
You've never dated anyone?
She asked. I shook my head. Does getting married to some girl in first grade with a plastic bagel count? She giggled, her smile making me smile as well. I decided to ask her as well. What about you?
Me what?
She asked, a bit confused. Have you ever been in a relationship? She shook her head too.
Nope. I've been so busy with schoolwork, I've never really had time to date and stuff.
Well, now that our school is gone, you'll be able to pursue your non-academic dreams to your heart's content, I told her with a smile. She nodded.
For now, let's focus on pursuing our dreams of not dying.
Over there, I said, pointing down the alleyway as we passed an unconscious hobo next to a dirty old dumpster. Space pointed towards a car on the other end of the alley, one that seemed like the perfect solution. A red sports car sat on the side of the road, the sun's rays gleaming off it. It seemed fast enough to catch up to Andrew, just depended on if either of us could drive it. This seems sufficient, I said as I hopped over the door and into the convertible.
Stealing a car? Are you sure?
She asked. I shrugged. Drastic situations call for drastic measures. Just keep a lookout. I searched the car, checking under the seats, the glove box, and even the sun blockers. However, there was no trace of any key of sorts. The hot wiring idea was almost not an option, since I actually had no idea how to do it. If only Hunter were here, that moron knew how to hotwire cars, I thought to myself, frowning.
Hey, Annie.
I turned around to see Space standing beside a motorcycle, a small key in hand. I climbed out of the car, rushing to her, as she held the small jingly key in her hand. Where did you get this? I asked, curiously.
It was stuffed in this compartment, on the side.
She said, as she knelt down, opening it up to reveal a bunch of random junk inside. I knelt down as well, reaching inside and pulling out a black handgun. Space stared at the gun in shock, backing away. However, I turned around and handed the gun to her, placing it in her hands. Take this, I told her, before picking up one of the 2 helmets hanging on the handlebars.
Annie, I can't.
Look, we both have seen what the world is coming to. You saw those news reports. We don't know what to expect when we get there, so it's best to carry a weapon just in case, I told her, taking my hand away and leaving the gun in her grasp. She nodded, begrudgingly, stuffing the gun into her waistband and putting her shirt over it. She then climbed onto the motorcycle behind me, clumsily putting on the second motorcycle helmet.
You do know how to drive this thing, right?
I've never driven a real one, but I played Grand Theft Auto in VR once.
What? How the hell are you?
I started up the motorcycle, listening to the vehicle as it roared to life. She latched onto me tightly, her nails digging into my jacket. I'd probably have some marks on my waist by the time we got there. All right, Spacey, next stop, Indiana, I said as I slammed on the gas pedal, speeding down the road. The motorcycle shot forward and I swerved away from the car beside us, nearly hitting a street sign and trash can in the process. However, I managed to slow it to a steady speed, smirking as Space shrieked in fear behind me.
Slow down, slow down, slow down!
She exclaimed. Just like the simulations, I muttered with a chuckle.